Hello my lovelies, so this is Lizzie from Love From Lizi, and today I'm bringing you the August 2018 Love From Lizi 10 cards 1 kit video. So here I'm going to show you how I made the card bases. Now I used this style card base for 8 of my cards. The other 2 I will show you how I made separately, but all I do is split one of my sheets lengthways down the middle and then score them in half just to make a standard A2 size card base. Okay, so on to the first card. I have die cut a circle of white cardstock, and then I'm using the gift die that comes as part of the kit, and I've centered it up with the bow laid on top to make sure it fits nicely, and then I'm just sticking a little piece of acetate over where the gift is cut on the reverse side, and then I'm going to make a well because I'm going to make a shaker card. So I double up my Scotch adhesive foam just to make sure that there's enough space for the sequins to shimmy around in there. And then I fill in all the little pieces so that it's nice and supported all the way around the edges, because I don't want it to get crushed in the post on one side. So all I'm doing is using up the tiny wee little scraps there. And then here you see I'm just taking one of the pattern papers from the kit and I'm popping some ATG onto the back. I've just trimmed, I think it's about 1.5 inches there. And I'm just laying it directly up the centre of the card, and then using the back side of the card as a guide, I'm trimming off the extra. And then I run one of the thinnest peel-offs along either of the edges there of the pattern paper, just to give it a nice finish. And these peel-offs are brand new colour to us. They're black diamond, so they are really shiny, but the glitter is all encased, which is great. And then here I just wanted to cut the bow out of some silver, so I used a little bit of the pattern paper, and I've taped that on, run that through my die cutter, and I'm just using some glossy accents to attach that down because part of it will be sticking to the acetate, so I want something that's going to hold really well. So I pop that on, and using my tweezers so that my fingers are out of the way and I can see the centre, I just lay that over the acetate and then up onto the top of the circle. Give that a little press, and then I lay the sequins on directly onto the card front, and here you're seeing me pick out the gold ones because I wanted to keep this card just black, silver and white. So I pick out those few, remove the backing, and then place that on top of the sequins there. Give it a really good firm press around all the edges so that no sequins get stuck underneath. And I've taken one of the little sentiments saying "You are a star," and I've used Versify. Now in hindsight I should have stamped that first because the corner of my acrylic block got caught a little bit, but it's fine. On to card 2, and here I've got a Hero Arts. It's like a gradient ink pad, and this was a little bit faffy to do, but I really do like the effect. So I just used the lightest silver, and then over the edges I used the middle one, so I'll show you a little bit clearer on this one. So I did have to clean the Misty up because I got covered in ink. I splodged it all over the place. But so I lay the stamp onto the Misty, and then I'm selectively inking, as you can see here, and the furthest outer points I'm letting touch into the next colour, so it gives like quite a nice gradient on the star when it's stamped down. It is quite difficult to see because they are pigment inks. They're very shiny and the camera's not picking it up too well. But I stamped 3 of those, making sure that they all went over the edge a little bit so that it was quite organic. If you're going to mimic this card, do be careful where you lay it. Unless you have thoroughly cleaned your stamp, it will leave a mark. So be sure when you're choosing where to lay the stamp pad. So here I'm just using some anti-static powder tool because I want to use the large stamp that comes in the kit, and particularly over the pigment ink because pigment ink takes longer to dry, and I'm a little bit impatient. If you're going to replicate this card, I would suggest letting it thoroughly dry before doing this process, but I'll show you how I got around that. So I did the anti-static powder, I've positioned my stamp, then I'm using Versamark. Now this is the first time I'm using this stamp, but Versamark primes the stamps quite nicely, and because it's in the Misty it doesn't matter, I can just keep going back and forth and that'll be fine. I did do a couple of layers on it just to make sure that it was really nice and juicy, and then tipped over the silver dollar embossing powder that comes in the kit. And I use a coffee filter to catch it all because it's not static, it tips off of that grate to get it all back into the pot. So I went all the way over, making sure that I'd got really nice good coverage, and there was a little bit in the ink, so I just used a paintbrush very gently to knock it out. And I left the heat aspect in this because look at the way that turns. I absolutely love it. Heat embossing is one of my favourite techniques, especially when it's a solid stamp like this because it shows up ever so pretty. And then here I'm using the Happy Birthday ribbon that came as part of the kit, and I'm just tying a simple little knot. I was going to do a bow, but the ribbon was not playing ball with me, and it was quite late at night, and I was quite happy with the tie. One of the things that I like about this kit, because it is just black, white, gold and silver, it works really well for masculine cards, and I think any of these cards would lend themselves very well to being gifted to a teenager or a man. Anyway, I'm on to card 3 now, and I've used a journal. This is journal card die, I believe, from Lawn Fawn. And I've just die cut the front of my card panel out, and I've used black for this. And here I'm using my pencil just to mark where I want to cut the vellum. And then I'm running some double-sided sellotape along the inside of the card, because this is how I'm going to adhere the vellum on. And here I'm just going to do some charms. So I've decided to go with gold because the vellum piece that I've chosen is gold, and I've picked 5 charms because I like working with uneven numbers. I think it sits better and is more pleasing to the eye. I've removed the top piece of double-sided tape, and here I've got this thread. Now it's a clear thread. It's like it's almost like a plastic thread, and then I'm just lacing it through and then laying the tail ends of the thread into the double-sided tape at the top. And I do that for all 5, leaving them all dangling at different heights and quite regularly spaced out, but just so that there'll be some nice movement with this card. And then once I've stuck all 5 of those down, I get another piece of double-sided tape and I just pop that over the top of where the threads are, just to give them that little bit extra security to hold them in place. Then I remove all of the backing paper, all of the backing release paper from the tape, and I lay the vellum on top. And I give that a really nice firm burnish with my finger. You can also use a bone folder for that, just to make sure it has got a really good stick. There we go, there's the bone folder. So I don't want any of that coming away. Then from the front, trim the extra of the vellum off, because I find it much easier to cut a little bit larger and then trim it away afterwards, then cutting it to be exactly the right size and lining it all up perfectly. And here I've taken the little star from the stamp set, and I'm just using Versamark randomly around the edge, just to give a little bit of interest. I didn't put a sentiment on this card, just to leave the inside ready and available. And unfortunately my camera died before I'd finished the inside, but I just laid another sheet of black along the inside. So here we're now into the next card, and I'm card 4, and I'm just popping out one of the bows just to show you how these assemble. They're really nice and super easy. You just pop them out, and then I just use my pokey tool and I popped all the little holes out as well. And I've taken a hello tag also from the kit, and then sometimes there are these sort of like little hangy bits from where you've popped them out, so I just trim those off with a pair of scissors. And using my bone folder here on the bow, just to make sure it's got a really nice smooth curve, I use a brad through the centre and then fold the back pieces of the bow in, and then I lay the back piece in, and then there isn't a hole in this tag, so I just used my pokey tool a few times side by side and then moved it around, and then popped that also onto the back of the tag, and then I have hello. And here I'm using some Scotch mounting tape. Again, I'm just wanting to adhere it onto this die cut circle of vellum that I've made, and I put 2 layers of foam tape at the bottom, and then a single piece of foam tape behind the bow and the top part of the tag, so that I could then stick it onto the vellum, but then mount on the back of the vellum as well, so the vellum's got a little bit of lift to it, so it's not just flush to the card. And because there's a double layer at the bottom, it will all lay nicely, and there won't be any sagging involved. So I position that onto the front of the card, and then I add a little piece of ribbon. And I did mess this up a little bit actually. In the video I didn't stick the ribbon perfectly straight. I did correct it, but I did it off camera afterwards. So I used the grid lines on my mat, but it was here, it was in the right place, and then when I lifted it and tucked it down, it jumped up a little bit, so it's not straight, but I did correct it. So that's the end of that card, and we're now into card 5. Now this is one of the different card bases that I did. So I used just some masking tape because I don't have a trimmer long enough that would facilitate this, so I used the tape. And then I was going to draw a pencil line, I thought, but then I've only got to rub that out, so I just cut along the edge of the tape. So quite a simple technique, but you do need to make sure that you go corner to corner to make sure that it folds correctly. And at the top there, I hadn't laid the tape exactly to the corner, and it did make a difference on my second card, but I worked around it, and I'll talk you through that when we get to that card. So I use my trimmer just as a scoreboard here, and I measure what would be a standard card base, so 5.5 and then 4.25 on the shorter side. So once that's all measured in, you get sort of the square shape, the rectangular shape, sorry, of what the card base would be. And then I fold in both corners. And here is my card. So now I've just taken a scrap of white card. So this was extra from the kit. I didn't add in a few extra little pieces of card. And then I'm anti-static powdering on that particular piece of card, and then using the large stamp again, giving that a good firm press with my Versamark. I think when it's in the MISTI, it's just habit to stamp it twice. I'm sure once would have been fine, but I went with 2. And then I heat embossed using the Silver Dollar embossing powder from the kit, making sure again that I had full coverage over all the little corner pieces, and then just used a paintbrush to brush away any errant pieces that had stuck where they shouldn't have done. And then heat set that, and again, because it's just so pretty to watch, I've left that in the video for you to see. But it is super fine, and it picks up all the detail. It is really good. I mean, the anti-static powder tool is a godsend. It does make heat embossing so much tidier. And then I'm just using my scissors. You could draw a pencil line around this if you're not comfortable to fussy cut just straight off like this. But I just left a little white border around the edges of all of it. And then here I've taken my card base back to my trimmer, and I'm merely moving it along 1/4 of an inch at a time and just scoring, and I'm making sure that I'm scoring from the inside of the card, so the side that you can see is the inside, so that when you close the card, the raised embossed lines are coming out. You can do it either way, it doesn't make any odds. It was just, this is the way I decided to do. And because I'd gone 1/4 of an inch, when I folded those 2 pieces in together, those embossed lines all join. And here I've just worked out which part I'm only going to stick the top part of this hexagon down, so that the card will still open. So I'm putting some foam tape on just where it's not going to touch, so I'm removing all the backing here now, and then when I lay that onto the front of my card, it will only stick to that top panel. I do fuss around a little bit because I really did want it square, but now you see it will open nicely. And I use 3 of the hexagon mirror tiles, and I fiddle around a little bit with where I want to place them, but I just pop 2 towards the top and 1 at the bottom, and that's the end of that card. So it's a little bit different. And now we're into card 6, and I'm using that waste piece from when I made the dangling card, the black piece of the journal card that I cut out, and then I'm putting the medallion stamp, I suppose we can call it, into the MISTI. I anti-static powder onto the black, and it does look like a hot mess right now, but don't worry, it comes away with your fingers when you gently rub it. I use the Versamark, ever so sorry, to give a good double stamp of that, and then again I heat emboss, and on the black it really is very striking. But because this embossing powder is ultra fine, you can do these lovely intricate designs and it still comes good. And then I reposition that back into my MISTI and use one of the sentiments from the stamp set, because those little sentiments all fit within, which is great. And I could have raised this up, I could have used a different colour embossing powder, but I just wanted to keep it uniform, so I've double stamped that again in the Versamark, and then heat set that as well. And then here, this is me just removing the anti-static powder. You can just simply rub your hands over it, and if you keep going, it will come away. And then I chose the white ribbon just to wrap around the top and the bottom. I did use my tape runner, and I did have to go in and put some extra adhesive on, because whilst it was fine when I'd made it, after a little while the ribbon did actually pop out. So this is great if you just want something to hold it in place while you're making sure you've got it all lined up straight, but I wouldn't necessarily use tape runner to hold the ribbons down permanently. So I've just put a little strip at the top and the bottom with the ribbon, and I'm using that other card base. Now here you can perhaps just see in the top right hand corner where I hadn't measured the tape correctly when I cut it. There was a gap. So to correct this, I just mark on the two bottom corners how much needs to come away to make that gap uniform. So I cut a little bit from the bottom corner to match up with the area at the top. And here I'm running the widest of the black peel-offs along that seam because I didn't want it to look like a mistake, although it was and I was covering it up. I wanted it to be like a feature of the card. So now the card doesn't close fully, but it's highlighted as such, so it looks like it's supposed to be part of the design. Those peel-offs, I absolutely love them because they go on almost every card and they really do finish something. So here I have my tile and I'm doing the same as I did with the last one. I'm just going to work out where, so it's the top and the bottom, and then I'm just popping the foam tape in where it will sit against the top portion of the card only, as in it won't be stuck to the bottom as well. Remove the backing and position that on. And there was a little bit too much white space for me here, so I got my Nuvo drops and just did a little test run first off. It's always best to try to make sure that you don't get a great big blob. And then here I do a lot of this sort of work by eye, if you like. I work out the outer edges and then I work inwards so that the spacing is largely even. Again, you can do this with a pencil and a ruler if you're more comfortable that way. But this is how I often do a lot of my things. I like working by eye. It's faster for me as well. I think that's probably me just being lazy. But so I pop those tiny weeny little dots in place, and then that is the end of card 6. So here's card 7. And card 7, I'm just using some of the gold patterned papers, and I measure out the size of the card front. Use my T-square ruler and pencil to do so, and then I just follow the lines with my trimmer. And then once I've snipped that out, I then measure off an inch of this star patterned paper, which obviously the stars are much smaller on. And then I cut these pieces at 1.5 inches each, so they are little rectangles. I wanted to have 4 of them. So just snip those all down, nice and uniform. And then I use my crocodile corner chomper on the smaller corner, which I believe is the 1/4 inch cut. And then I cut 2 corners, and I switched which corners that I cut so that I could create sort of like a little pattern down the front. I cut 2 strips of the skinny ribbon, and then using the tape runner, but because I was sticking that straight onto the card front as well, the tape runner was fine in this instance. Because there was more adhesive to hold it in place. And I just stuck them slightly over to the right of the card so that they would both sit underneath the tiles. But you could equally use peel-off ribbons for this if you didn't want to use actual material ribbon. And then I just used my ATG gun to attach that directly onto my card front. Again, I'm just back now to using my standard top fold A2 size card. I pop a little bit of foam tape behind each of my little corner chomped tiles, and then before I remove all the adhesive, I just line them up to space them out. Again, you can do this with a ruler, but I just sort of lay them out and then just start sticking. And I use my tweezers to place them down because when I put my fingers in the way, things can be slightly crooked, and it's just easier for me to see where things are going this way. And then once they are all down, I start working on my sentiment. And here I've just pinched a little bit of iridescent cardstock that was from a previous kit, and have taken the "You Are a Star" sentiment, because obviously it's all the star paper, and I heat emboss. And I actually use the Golden Crown embossing powder, which came in the May Love From Lizi card kit, but it is available in the shop because it has been very popular. But it's also ultra fine, just the same as the silver dollar as well. And then I pop a little bit of foam mounting tape up on the back, and then attach that to the top of the card, and that is the end of card 7. So now here's card 8, and I'm going to do some stenciling. So I do just want to apologise to everyone for this being up a couple of days later than usual, but I had a little holiday with my piggy. We went sailing for a few days with the family, which was really nice. Carson is now on his summer holidays from nursery, so I'm trying to make as many memories as possible because he starts school in September and he's far too small to go. We've got to go and get his uniform shortly, which it makes me very sad. I'm happy, but I'm sad as well. So anyway, I'll blither on. Here I've used some embossing mousse from Nouveau, and I have just scraped it over the stencil in pulling the trowel left, right, up, down, diagonally, just to work it right into all of the little gaps there. And then I remove the masking tape, which I'd put along the fold to make sure I didn't get any on the back. And here I've picked out from the charm pack some of the silver circular charms, and I'm just sort of choosing where to lay them. There's no rhyme or reason, I just sort of laid them around. And putting the larger charms in the larger circles, working down in size. And then I use glossy accents to hold them down to make sure that they're not going to budge anywhere. And with those larger ones, I didn't put them centrally, I put them slightly off to the sides just to give a bit more interest. And at the bottom left of the card, you can see I managed to get some of the embellishment paste under the stencil. So I'm putting a bit of the velvet ribbon just along that seam, just to hide my little error, my happy mistake, as we say. And then just trimmed off the extra there, and I let that dry before I cut more. And this is how I often do sequins. I don't know that I always show this. So I get my glossy accents and I just dot. I tend to go from one corner to another, and then with the sequins again, I'm only using the silver, the smoky grey and the white sequins, just so that they show up. Please excuse my head making an appearance there. And then I just fill in all of those little glossy accent dots with sequins, and then I use the silver ink again from that gradient stamp. So you don't have to only use these gradient stamps for gradient work, you can just use the colours individually. So I stamped Made with Love, and then now that the glossy accents on the ribbon is dry, I just trim off those little extra pieces, and that's that card made. So super simple, but quite nice and effective and quite shiny. And now we're into card 9. So I'm now using another piece of that vellum that I'd used originally, and I trimmed a piece. I do actually trim this a little bit further down, and I'm just taking some white cardstock. This is from my stash. I popped a little bit extra in, and here I'm cutting a strip, and I trimmed that down as well. This is just 2 inches wide, this strip of cardstock, and I put that right up on the right hand edge using the ATG gun just to attach it on, and trimmed off the extra. And then that piece of vellum I have cut to be 2.5 inches wide, so that it will fit through my little Xyron machine, and then I've given it a really good burnish. I had a little bit of a incident with my Xyron machine when I used it with my Punchinella because I hadn't burnished it well enough. So I've learnt my lesson, and now everything gets a really good, strong and thorough burnishing. So remove the backing, take off the vellum, and then what I do is I lay this over the top of the cardstock but slightly offset, so there is a little white bit peeking out to the right hand side, and lay that again over the black and the white there. Again, gave it a really good burnish. The good thing about the Xyron machine is because it puts adhesive everywhere, you don't see the adhesive. I think if you only had it in certain bits, it would show up. But here I'm just running some peel-offs along now. I've trimmed off the extra of the vellum off camera, and I'm just using the varying widths along the seams and in places just to give a little bit more interest. And I do save all of the waste bits. I'm very frugal with my peel-offs because they do go a long way, and even the little pieces are very useful. And so I'm nearly done here, lining up all the edges, but it just gives such a finished look to something that is so very simple. And then trim off all the little end pieces. And here I've taken one of the tags from the kit, and then I've taken the little circular letters and spelled out good luck, and I've just stuck them onto my ruler, and then using my ruler and the lines of the grid mat to make sure it's all straight, I position them all, and I always position the letters in the middle of the word first, and then work out so that the spacing is all right and I don't end up on part of the tag that I didn't want to be. And so I have good, and then underneath is luck. And with hindsight, I may have switched out the gold and white on luck so that it was every other, but I'm not unhappy with this. I pierced a hole using my pokey tool just at the top of the tag, and I've pushed through both black and white skinny ribbons to be able to create a little loop. I did tidy that hole with my craft knife a little bit, and I just used some double-sided tape on the back of that loop just to make sure that it didn't fidget and undo itself when it was sent on. And then I used some Scotch mounting tape on the back of the tag, and then attached that on the front of the card. And the nice thing about this is this tag matches the vellum. And then here I'm just using my Nuvo drops, and I just create a little pattern really. I didn't really know where I was going with it until I started, and I just put a little dot in between each of the circles, and then I did the same at the top and the bottom, so it's created sort of like a flat hexagon. And here I'm now onto the final card, and I wanted to use some of the bunting. Now, bunting is quite obvious, I think, with how you can use it. You can just create nice little bunting things across the front of the page, so I wanted to use this for something a little bit different. And I decided to create a flower. So I popped out 6 of the tags. I laid them all face down, and then using double-sided sellotape, it doesn't have to be, you could use anything on the back here because nobody will see it. I just laid them all really butted close together and taped them all in place. So then once they are all taped down, when I turn over, you'll see the flower. Ta-da! And then just to accentuate the different petals, I use the skinniest of the peel-offs, and I just run those down what would be the seams. Now I could have folded the edge of those tags, the bunting tags, over, or I could have snipped them off and it would have made a perfect hexagon, but I quite liked the rounded edge on it with the embossed line. I think it looked quite nice. And then I used one of the mirror tiles as sort of the centerpiece of the flower. And then here I wanted to create my sentiment, so I used one of the small sentiment stamps from the set, and then Versamark and heat embossed the silver dollar embossing powder again. And I did it in the centre of what will be a belly band. This was just a waste piece of scrap that I had. And then once that was all heat set, I used some of the waste peel-offs from the corners of that hexagon out to the edge to create sort of like, it almost makes it look like a belt, like a Santa belt. And then once they were all stuck down, I trim off around it. It's like I fussy cut this out. So I left a very small white border beneath the peel-off and the sentiment as well. It's quite difficult to describe, but as you see, it will make sense. So that it was like the diamond was sat on a fake ribbon, a fake white ribbon. And then I used my foam mounting tape onto the back of my flower, pop that towards the top in the centre. Now on the reverse side of the belly band, I put some double-sided sellotape, took that off, and then I laid 2 of the mirror diamonds into the back. Now I could have carried that all the way along to the edge, but I quite liked the emphasis that it put in the centre. And then I used my skinny Scotch tape along the edges because those mirror tiles are quite 3D. It then meant that it would mount flush, so I stick that into the bottom and then flip over, use the edge of the card base just to trim down the excess tails there. So that's that card made. So now this is everything that's left in the kit. So there is tons of goodies. You've obviously got lots of keepies, like the stencil, the dies, the embossing powder, the Nuvo drops, the stamps. There's still plenty of the ribbon and charms. There were a few little scrappy pieces, but there was tons of stickers left still. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half of used, and then a few of the tags and a few of the buntings. But then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the complete papers, 2 of the complete vellums, and a complete page of journaling cards still. So if you're willing to add more cardstock in, you can get so much more in. Now I try to use just straightforward crafting extras, but these are all the bits and pieces that I used, as well as obviously my die cutter and my heat gun. It's tricky. I do try to use minimal, but then I also want to make the cards look as good as possible, so whilst keeping them simple. So it is largely tools with a few added extra bits and pieces. So thanks ever so much for sticking with me to the very end again. Here are some still shots of the cards. The design team have been working like crazy, so all of their cards will be up very soon, I hope. I have got some exciting news to be sharing soon. Do join the Facebook group, because all shall be revealed there. The next month's kit is the Love From Lizi's 2nd birthday, so it's going to be a super kit as well. So subscribers obviously will get it at the flat rate, but that month's standalone kit will be slightly more expensive because there's going to be that much more product in it. So until next time, thanks very much and happy paper crafting. Bye!